A man finds an orc girl hanging from a tree, but to free her he offers a powerful condition. The Thornwood Forest had a reputation. Not the good kind. The kind that made merchants pay extra to go around it, even if around meant 3 extra days of travel. The kind that made mothers tell their children stories about what happens to people who wander in after dark. The kind that made grown men check over their shoulders and quicken their pace when the trees started to thin. Wulfric knew all this. He walked into it anyway. He'd been walking for 6 days now. 6 days since he'd left the last town that would have him. 6 days since he'd realized that exile wasn't just about being kicked out of places. It was about running out of places to go. The Thornwood was the kind of forest that didn't care about your past, mostly because it was too busy trying to kill you in the present. The trees here grew wrong, too tall, too close together. Their branches twisted in ways that blocked out the sky even at noon, creating a permanent twilight that played tricks on your eyes. Moss covered everything. Thick, dark green moss that muffled sound and made the whole forest feel like walking through a tomb. Wulfric stopped. Not because he wanted to, because something was hanging from the tree ahead of him. His first thought was, another hunter's trap. His second thought was, that's too big for deer. His third thought, the one that made his hand move to his sword, was, that's a person, not just a person, an orc. She hung upside down, suspended by thick ropes that bound her ankles to a high branch. Her arms dangled limply toward the ground, fingertips brushing the moss about 2 feet from the forest floor. She wasn't moving. For a long moment, Wulfric thought she was dead. Then her eyes opened. Green eyes. Not the pale green of spring leaves, but the deep green of forest shadows. They fixed on him with the kind of clarity that only comes from someone who's been hanging there long enough to think about death and decide they're not quite ready for it yet. Human, she said. Her voice was rough, raw, like she'd been screaming and then decided it wasn't worth the effort anymore. Wulfric didn't move. His brain was doing calculations. Orc in the Thornwood, hung by her own kind. That's what this looked like. Punishment. Maybe for cowardice. Maybe for theft. Maybe for something worse. Walking away would be the smart thing. The safe thing. He started walking forward instead. Smart and safe had stopped being his priorities about 6 days ago. You're going to cut me down. It wasn't a question. She said it like she was reading his mind, or maybe like she'd already given up on hoping and decided to just state facts. Maybe, Wulfric said, stopping about 10 feet away, close enough to see the details now. The iron chain around her neck, half hidden beneath her matted black hair, the way her green skin had paled in some places from hanging too long. The tribal markings on her arms, Orc clan symbols he didn't recognize. Depends. On what? On whether you deserve it. She made a sound that might have been a laugh if she'd had enough air in her lungs. No one deserves to die hanging from a tree like dried meat. That's not what I asked. Her eyes narrowed. Even upside down, even weak from however many hours she'd been hanging there, she managed to look dangerous. That was impressive, in a terrifying sort of way. They hung me because I failed, she said. Failed my trial. Failed my clan. Failed to prove I was worth the space I took up in this world. What kind of trial? The kind where you either come back with blood on your hands or you don't come back at all. I chose the third option. She paused, swallowed. I came back empty-handed. Wulfric studied her, really looked at her this time. She was young, younger than he'd initially thought. Early 20s, maybe. Built like every orc he'd ever seen, tall, muscular, the kind of body that was made for swinging weapons and breaking things. But there was something in her eyes, something that didn't match the warrior body. Fear, real, genuine fear. Not of him, of herself. So they strung you up here to die, Wulfric said. Braca strung me up here to think, she corrected. Think about what it means to dishonor the clan. Think about whether I want to die as Kagra the coward or Kagra the nothing. She closed her eyes. Thinking time's almost over. Blood's been pooling in my head for, I don't know, long enough that everything sounds like it's underwater. If I cut you down, Wulfric said slowly, what happens then? Then I fall and probably die anyway because I haven't felt my legs in 3 hours. After that, Kagra opened her eyes again. studied him with the same intensity he'd studied her. "You're not from around here. Neither are you, apparently. You're alone. Exiled. I can smell it on you." She sniffed the air. Humans smell different when they've been cast out. Less like soap and hope, more like resignation. Like you've stopped fighting the world and started just existing in it. Wulfric's jaw tightened. Observant. Hanging gives you time to notice things. Kagra shifted slightly. The rope creaked. "You want to make a deal. I want information first. If I cut you down, where do you go?" "Nowhere. Can't go back to my clan. Can't go to another clan. Word travels fast about failures. Can't go to human settlements because, well..." She gestured weakly at her green skin. "Monster. So you die in the forest one way or another. That's the general plan, yes." Wulfric reached for his sword, drew it slowly. The sound of steel leaving leather made Kagra tense, as much as someone hanging upside down could tense. "Here's my condition," he said, walking closer. "I cut you down. I help you walk until your legs work again. I share my supplies until you're strong enough to not die in the next 5 minutes. He stopped directly beneath her, looking up into those green eyes. "And in return, you work for me." Kagra blinked. "Work for you. I need someone who knows these lands. Someone who can fight when necessary. Someone who doesn't have anywhere else to go, which means you won't suddenly decide to run off when things get difficult. You want an orc bodyguard. I want a partner. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Partners get a say in where we go and what we do. Bodyguards just follow orders." Wulfric raised his sword, positioning it near the rope. "Partners also get an equal share of whatever we earn, which currently is nothing, but theoretically could become something." Kagra stared at him. Really stared. Like she was trying to figure out if this was some elaborate human trick, or if he was genuinely this stupid. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why what? Why help me? You're human. I'm orc. Our species have been killing each other since before either of us was born. You should walk away. You should let me hang here. You should doesn't mean anything," Wulfric interrupted. "I should have stayed with my guild. I should have kept my mouth shut when I saw them beating that merchant. I should have let them rob him blind and kept collecting my pay." He lowered the sword. "Not cutting yet. Waiting. But I didn't. And now I'm here. And you're here, and we can either both die alone in this forest, or we can try not dying together. Those are the options." Silence. The kind of silence that feels like the forest is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next. "You cut me down," Kagra said slowly, "and I probably throw up immediately. Hanging upside down does things to your stomach, just warning you. I've seen worse. Then I'll be useless for at least an hour while the blood flows back to where it's supposed to be. I can wait an hour. And after that, you trust me not to kill you in your sleep." Wulfric smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, more like the smile of someone who'd run out of things to lose. "No, but I trust that killing me doesn't get you anything except being alone again. And I think you're smart enough to know that dying alone is worse than living with someone who might stab you." Kagra thought about this, or tried to think about it through the blood pounding in her skull and the way her vision kept going dark at the edges. "Deal," she said. Wulfric cut the rope. She fell, hit the ground hard, and true to her word, immediately threw up into the moss. He stood there, sword still in hand, watching her retch and gasp and slowly curl into a ball as her body remembered what it was like to have blood flowing in the right direction. "Welcome to the partnership," he said. Kagra responded by throwing up again. It wasn't the most dignified start to a working relationship, but it was a start. The next hour was ugly, not violent ugly, just the uncomfortable reality of what happens when someone's been hanging upside down long enough that their body forgets how bodies are supposed to work. Kagra couldn't stand, couldn't even sit up properly at first. She just lay there in the moss, breathing hard, occasionally making sounds that suggested her legs were waking up in the most painful way possible. Wulfric sat on a fallen log about 10 feet away, giving her space. He'd pulled out a water skin and some dried meat from his pack, laying them within her reach. She hadn't touched them yet, too busy dealing with the fact that her entire nervous system was staging a revolt. "Pins and needles," she muttered through clenched teeth. Except the pins are on fire, and the needles are made of hate. That means the blood's flowing again. I know what it means. Doesn't make it hurt less. Wulfric watched her try to move her toes. Fail, try again, fail better. On the third attempt, her foot twitched. "How long were you up there?" he asked. Lost count after the sun moved twice, maybe 3 times. Hard to track when your head feels like it's going to explode. She finally managed to roll onto her side. Progress. Bracca's thorough when he punishes. Always has been. Bracca? War leader. Built like a mountain, learned to walk, and decided to make it everyone's problem. He's the one who decides punishments in our clan. She paused. Former clan. What's the punishment usually for failing a trial? Death. This was mercy. Her voice was flat when she said it. No sarcasm, just fact. Wulfric frowned. Hanging someone from a tree to die slowly is mercy, compared to what happens to traitors and deserters, yes. Kagra had managed to prop herself up on one elbow now. Her face was pale green instead of deep forest green, but at least she wasn't throwing up anymore. He could have made it public, could have made it painful, could have... She stopped, swallowed. This way, I get to think. Maybe find a way down, maybe find a way to die with something resembling dignity. Or maybe a stupid human comes along and offers you a deal. That too. She reached for the water skin. Her hand shook, but she managed to grab it, unscrew the cap, and drink. Not gulping, sipping, like someone who knew that drinking too fast after hanging upside down was a recipe for more throwing up. Your condition, she said after a long moment. The work, what kind of work? Surviving, traveling, maybe making some coin if we find settlements that don't immediately try to kill us. You don't have a plan. I have a direction, north, maybe east, somewhere that isn't here. Kagra almost laughed. Would have laughed if her ribs didn't feel like they were made of broken glass. You're just wandering. I'm being strategically flexible. You're lost. I prefer geographically uncertain. This time she did laugh, small, painful, but real. You saved an orc's life with no plan, no destination, and apparently no sense of self-preservation. We all have our flaws. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since she'd been hanging upside down. Saw the scars on his arms, the way he sat, ready to move but not tense, like someone who'd been in enough fights to know when one was coming and when it wasn't. The sword laying across his knees, close enough to grab, but not pointed at her. You're not scared of me, she said. Should I be? Most humans are. Most humans see orc and think monster, think savage, think run. Most humans haven't been exiled from everything they know for 6 days, with nothing but their thoughts and bad trail rations. Wulfric met her eyes. I figure if you were going to kill me, you'd have done it already. You're weak, but you're not that weak. I could still kill you. Probably. But you won't. Why not? Because you had a chance to lie about your clan. You could have said you were exiled for something noble, for standing up against tyranny or saving someone's life. But you told the truth. You failed a trial and couldn't bring yourself to kill. He tilted his head. People who can't kill in a trial usually can't kill in cold blood either. Kagra's jaw tightened. You don't know me. No, but I know killers, and you're not one. The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe because they were true. Maybe because they were exactly what Bracca had said before he'd tied the rope around her ankles. You're too soft, Kagra. Too human. You'll never be warrior. Never be worthy. She'd wanted to argue. Wanted to prove him wrong. But standing in that trial circle, knife in hand, looking at the bound human prisoner they'd given her to kill, she couldn't do it. The man had been a bandit, caught raiding orc territory. By all rights, he deserved death. But when she'd looked into his terrified eyes, all she'd seen was fear, raw, desperate fear, and she'd frozen. I'm a coward, she said quietly. Wulfric shook his head. You're selective. There's a difference. Not to my clan. Well, your clan hung you from a tree, so maybe their opinion isn't worth much. Kagra wanted to argue, wanted to defend the clan that had raised her, trained her, made her everything she was. But they'd also left her to die alone in the Thornwood, so Wulfric had a point. Can you stand? He asked. She tried. got about halfway up before her legs turned to water and she collapsed back into the moss. "That's a no," she muttered. "We'll wait." Wulfric stood, stretched, walked a small circle around the clearing, checking the area, checking for threats. "There's a cave about half a mile north. Saw it on the way in. We can make camp there tonight. You're going to carry me. If I have to. I'm taller than you, only by an inch, and muscle weighs more than it looks." Kagra looked down at herself, at her arms that had been thick with warrior muscle a week ago and were now starting to look thin, at her hands that shook even when she held them still, at the iron chain still hanging around her neck. The chain. She reached up, fingers wrapping around it, cold metal, heavy, the mark of her shame. "What's that?" Wulfric asked. "Punishment chain. Everyone who fails a trial gets one, marks you as unworthy until you either prove yourself or die trying. We should take it off." "Can't, it's locked. Only Braca has the key." Wulfric walked over, knelt down, examined the chain up close. It was thick iron, crude but effective, the kind of thing made to last, not to look pretty. The lock was simple but sturdy. He drew his sword. "What are you—" Kagra started. He swung. The blade hit the chain right at the lock. Once, twice. On the third strike, something gave. Metal screeched. The lock shattered. The chain fell into two pieces. Kagra stared at the broken halves, at the jagged metal ends, at the way they caught the filtered sunlight coming through the canopy. "You broke it," she said stupidly. "It was in the way." Wulfric picked up one half of the chain, examined it, then held it out to her. "Here." She took it automatically. "Why are you giving me the broken chain?" "Because it's yours. And because sometimes the weight we choose to carry matters more than the weight others put on us." He pocketed the other half. "Besides, partners share the burden." Kagra looked at the chain in her hand, at the broken link, at the symbol of her shame turned into something else, a reminder, not of failure, but of choice. She closed her fist around it. "I can probably walk now," she said. She couldn't, but she tried anyway, and Wulfric caught her when she fell. They made it to the cave before dark, barely. The cave wasn't much, just a hollow in a hillside, deep enough to shelter them from rain, but not deep enough to attract anything that actually lived in caves. Wulfric had checked it earlier. No bear scat, no bones, no signs of habitation. Just moss and stone, and the kind of dampness that meant mushrooms probably grew here during wetter seasons. Kagra collapsed against the back wall and didn't move for 10 minutes. Wulfric made a fire, small, controlled, just enough to warm them and cook something resembling food. He'd pulled out his travel rations, dried meat, hard bread, a few withered vegetables that had seen better days, and started preparing a meal that would generously be called edible. "You can't cook," Kagra observed. "I can make things hot and technically food-like. That's not cooking. That's committing crimes against ingredients. You want to cook? Can't feel my hands properly yet. Then you get crimes against ingredients." She watched him work, watched him cut the meat into strips, add it to a small pot with some water, throw in the vegetables without any apparent thought to seasoning or flavor. He was efficient, practical. The kind of cooking done by someone who saw food as fuel, not experience. "You lived alone," she said. "What gave it away? No one who's cooked for anyone else makes food that sad." Wulfric smiled slightly, didn't argue, just kept stirring the pot that was technically making stew and realistically making disappointment in liquid form. 3 years, he said after a while. 3 years since I left my home village, joined the Raven's Wing Guild. They were mercenaries mostly, good pay, decent people, clear rules about who you could rob and who you couldn't. What happened? They changed the rules. Decided who you could rob included anyone who couldn't fight back. He poured the not-quite stew into 2 wooden bowls, handed one to Kagra. I disagreed. Loudly. They disagreed with my disagreement, also loudly, but with more people and sharper objects. Kagra sipped the stew. It was as bad as it looked. You got exiled for having morals. I got exiled for being inconvenient. The morals were just the excuse. He sat down across from her, eating his own terrible creation without complaint. Your turn. How does an orc who can't kill end up in a warrior clan? Born into it, son of warriors, daughter of warriors. Warrior is what you become. No other option, no other path. She paused. I was good at it. Training, fighting, all the physical parts. I could swing an axe, throw a spear, break a shield, but when it came time to, she gestured vaguely, to do what warriors do, I couldn't. The trial. The trial, they gave me 3 chances, 3 different prisoners, 3 different ways to prove I could take a life when the clan needed it. She stared into her bowl. I failed all 3. What did you do instead? Stood there, knife in hand, frozen, like my body forgot how bodies work. She laughed bitterly. Braca said I had the body of a warrior and the heart of a human, meant it as an insult. He was right, though. Wulfric was quiet for a long moment. Then, you know what I think? That I'm weak? That you're strong in a different way. Takes more courage to not kill when everyone's telling you to than it does to just follow orders. Kagra looked up at him. You really believe that? I believe that if everyone just followed orders without thinking, the world would be an even bigger mess than it already is. He set down his bowl. I also believe that any clan stupid enough to throw away someone like you deserves what they get. They didn't throw me away. They gave me a chance to find my courage. They hung you from a tree to die. Let's not prettify it with chances. She wanted to argue, wanted to defend the clan that had raised her, but the broken chain in her pocket felt heavier than it should, and the truth was harder to ignore than she'd like. So what now? She asked. You have a half-dead orc who can't kill, no money, no plan, and apparently no cooking skills. What's the strategy? Head north. Find a settlement. See if anyone needs work that doesn't involve murder. You realize most settlements won't let me through the gate. Then we find settlements with lower standards. Those are called bandit camps. Flexible terminology. Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the fact that she was sitting in a cave with a human stranger eating the worst stew in recorded history, Kagra smiled. You're insane, she said. Probably. But I'm insane with a plan. You just said you don't have a plan. I have the concept of a plan. That's almost the same thing. The fire crackled. Outside, the thornwood made its evening sounds. Distant howls, rustling leaves, the general ambience of a forest that wanted you to know it was watching. Wulfric, Kagra said quietly. Yeah? Why did you really cut me down? Truth, no speeches about partnership or strategy. He was quiet, thinking. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. Because I know what it's like to hang there, he said. Maybe not literally, but metaphorically, waiting for someone to care enough to cut you down, and no one does. Everyone just walks past. And you start to think maybe you deserve it. He looked at her. No one deserves that. Not humans. Not orcs. No one. Kagra felt something tight in her chest loosen just a bit. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive the Thornwood, find a town, and figure out how to make money without killing people. That's going to be complicated. I'm okay with complicated. Good. Because tomorrow we start walking and your legs better work by then because I'm not carrying you. My legs will work. They didn't work great, but they worked enough. And the next morning, 2 exiles started walking north together. 1 human, 1 orc, both carrying half of a broken chain. The Thornwood watched them go and decided not to kill them, for now. 3 days of walking through the Thornwood taught Kagra several important things about humans. First, they complained about everything. Trees too close together, moss too slippery, mushrooms too suspicious-looking. Wulfric had an opinion about every environmental hazard, and he shared those opinions frequently. Second, they were fragile in weird ways. Kagra could walk all day without water. Wulfric needed to drink every few hours or he'd get headaches. She could eat raw meat if necessary. He needed it cooked or his stomach would stage a revolt. She could sleep on rocks. He needed at least some moss or he'd wake up stiff. Third, they were surprisingly durable in other ways. Wulfric had taken a bad fall on day 2, slipped on moss, hit his shoulder hard against a tree trunk, and just got up, swore impressively, and kept walking. No healing needed, no stopping, just pain, acknowledgement of pain, and then moving forward anyway. That part she understood. "Village ahead," Wulfric said, stopping at the edge of a ridgeline. Kagra joined him. Below, through the trees, she could see smoke, lots of it, the organized kind that came from chimneys, not forest fires. "That's not a village," she said. "That's a town." "What's the difference?" "Village has maybe 50 people. Town has hundreds. More guards, more rules, more people who'll notice a 6-foot orc walking through their streets." 5'11". "What?" "You're 5'11". "Same as me. You're just used to being around orcs who are 6'4" and make everything else look small by comparison." Kagra blinked. She'd never actually thought about that. In her clan, she'd been short, smaller than the other warriors, less physically imposing. But standing next to Wulfric, she realized she was exactly the same height. Weird. "Anyway," Wulfric continued, "we need supplies. We need information. We need to figure out where we're going. And that requires talking to people. People who'll try to kill me on sight. Maybe not. You're smaller than most orcs. Less tusks. Less—" He gestured vaguely at her face. "Aggressive looking. I have scars. Everyone has scars. Yours just happen to be on green skin. Wulfric, they'll kill me. Not if I introduce you first." Kagra stared at him. "Your plan is to just walk in and hope people are reasonable? My plan is to walk into Greta's tavern specifically. She's reasonable. Mostly. Sometimes." He started down the ridge. "She also owes me a favor from 3 years ago." "What kind of favor?" "The kind where I didn't report her watered-down ale to the Merchant Guild." "That's a terrible favor." "It's the favor we have. Come on." Kagra followed. Because what else was she going to do? Sit in the forest alone, go back to a clan that wanted her dead? No, she'd made a choice. She'd accepted the deal. Now she had to see it through. The town was called Millbrook, creative name. Apparently there was a mill and a brook. The town founder had not been burdened with imagination. They approached from the north, using the main road that was really more of a wide dirt path that traders had worn into the ground through years of use. No gate, no guards. Just an unspoken understanding that you probably shouldn't rob people within town limits because the sheriff would take it personally. "Act natural," Wulfric muttered. "I don't know what natural is for an orc in a human town." "Then act confident." "People don't question confidence." They walked in, and immediately people noticed. Of course they noticed. Kagra was 6 feet of green skin, black hair, and visible muscle walking down a street designed for farmers and craftsmen who'd never seen an orc except in terrifying stories told around fires. A woman gasped, pulled her child closer. A man reached for a pitchfork he wasn't actually holding. An old merchant just stared, mouth open, like he was witnessing something his brain couldn't process. "Greta's is this way," Wulfric said calmly, like he was leading a very normal person through a very normal town on a very normal day. Kagra kept walking, tried to look confident, probably looked terrified instead. But at least she was walking and not running. The tavern was called The Scarred Tankard. The sign showed a mug with a crack in it. Subtle. Wulfric pushed open the door. Inside it was dark, smoky, smelled like old beer and older bread. About a dozen people sat at various tables, drinking, talking, existing in that late afternoon space where it wasn't quite dinner yet, but definitely past work. Everyone stopped talking the second Kagra walked in. "Greta!" Wulfric called out, like nothing was wrong. "Still watering down the ale." A woman emerged from the back room. 50s. Grey hair pulled into a tight bun, face that suggested she'd seen too much of life to be impressed by much of anything. She took one look at Wulfric, one look at Kagra, and sighed the sigh of someone who knew her easy day had just become complicated. "Wulfric," she said, "you're alive." "Surprisingly, yes. And you brought a friend." "Partner, actually." Greta's eyes flicked to Kagra. Scanned her, not with fear, with assessment, the way someone counts scars. "She has 6 visible scars," Greta said. 3 on the arms, 2 on the face, 1 on the collarbone. That's above average for someone her age. "You still doing that?" Wulfric asked. "More scars means more survival. More survival means more reliability." Greta wiped her hands on her apron. "Sit, both of you." I'll bring food. She disappeared into the back before anyone could argue. Wulfric sat at a table in the corner, far from the door, far from the windows, close enough to escape if necessary, but not so close that it looked suspicious. Cagra sat across from him, tried not to notice the way everyone in the tavern was still staring at her. "They're going to kill me," she whispered. "They're going to wonder if they should kill you," Wulfric corrected. "There's a difference. If they were going to kill you, someone would have thrown something by now." "That's not comforting. It's realistic." Greta returned with 2 bowls of stew. Real stew, the kind with actual vegetables and meat that had been cooked with seasoning and care. She set them down, then sat down herself, which was apparently not standard tavern owner behavior based on the way the other patrons looked even more confused. "So," Greta said. "Orc." "Yes," Cagra said. "In my tavern." "Yes." "Unarmed." "Yes." "With Wulfric." "Technically, yes." Greta looked at Wulfric. "You got exiled from the Raven's Wing and decided to partner with an orc. That's bold. Stupid. But bold. She needs work. I need help. It's mutually beneficial. It's mutually suicidal. You know what people think of orcs." "I know what people think. People also thought the earth was flat once. People are often wrong." Greta snorted, looked back at Cagra. "You have a name?" "Cagra." "What clan?" "None anymore." "Exiled?" "Sort of." "Sort of isn't an answer." Cagra hesitated, then decided truth was easier than lying. "Failed my warrior trials. Couldn't kill when the clan needed me to. They hung me in the Thornwood to think about my choices. Wulfric cut me down." Greta was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and tapped Cagra's wrist. "Show me your hands." Cagra extended her hands, palms up. Greta examined them, traced the calluses, the healed cuts. The way the knuckles had been broken and healed slightly wrong. Fighter's hands. You can swing a weapon. Yes. But you can't kill. No. Good. Greta sat back. "We get enough killers through here. Most of them are idiots." "You're not afraid of me?" Cagra asked. "Honey, I've run this tavern for 30 years. I've dealt with drunk miners, angry merchants, guards who think badges give them permission to harass staff. You think I'm scared of a young orc who can't kill? Please." She stood up. "Eat. You both look half dead. I'll bring bread." She left. The tavern slowly returned to its normal noise level. People stopped staring quite so obviously. A few went back to their drinks. One old man kept watching Cagra, but more out of curiosity than hostility. "That went well," Wulfric said. "She's insane. She's practical. Greta doesn't care about species. She cares about whether you cause problems in her tavern. Don't cause problems. She doesn't care." Cagra ate the stew. It was good. Actually good, like made by someone who understood food good. After 3 days of Wulfric's cooking, it tasted like a miracle. "We need work," she said between bites. "I know. Work that doesn't require killing. I'm aware. In a town that probably has 3 jobs total and none of them involve hiring orcs. Your optimism is inspiring. I'm being realistic. Realism is just pessimism with facts." Before Cagra could respond, the tavern door banged open. A man stumbled in, old, weathered, looked like he'd been carved from leather and bad decisions. He was bleeding from a cut on his arm and breathing hard like he'd been running. "Raiders," he gasped, "coming from the east, maybe 20 of them. Torches, weapons. They'll be here in minutes." The tavern erupted. People jumped up. Some ran for the door. Others just stood there, frozen, trying to process what they'd just heard. Greta came out from the back, looked at the bleeding man, looked at the chaos, then looked at Wulfric. "You still know how to fight?" she asked. "Yes." "Good." She pointed at Cagra. "Can she fight?" "Yes." "Does she need to kill to fight?" Wulfric looked at Cagra. Cagra looked back. An entire conversation happened in that glance. A question asked and answered. "No," Wulfric said, "she doesn't." Greta nodded, reached under the bar, pulled out a sword. Not fancy, just functional, the kind of weapon kept for emergencies. She tossed it to Cagra. "Welcome to Millbrook," Greta said. "Try not to die in the first 5 minutes. 20 raiders, torches, weapons." Really bad timing. Kagra stood in the town square, sword in hand, trying to remember every training session her clan had drilled into her body. The part of her that was warrior took over. Stance widened, weight balanced, grip firm, but not tense. She could fight. She'd always been able to fight. Fighting was just moving with purpose. It was the killing that had been the problem. Wulfric stood beside her. He'd borrowed a second sword from Greta's emergency weapons collection, which apparently was a thing successful tavern owners kept. About 15 townsfolk had joined them. Farmers, craftsmen, one very angry baker with a rolling pin. "They'll come from the main road," Wulfric said. "Fast, aggressive, trying to overwhelm us before we can organize." Standard raid tactics. Kagra agreed. "You've seen raids before. My clan did 3 last summer. I was on defense that time. Never thought I'd be defending a human town." She adjusted her grip on the sword. "Life's weird." "That it is." The raiders appeared right on schedule. Torches first. Then the sound of boots and war cries, and the general noise of people who'd decided violence was the solution to whatever problem they'd invented. "Form a line!" Greta shouted. She'd appeared with a crossbow. Apparently the emergency weapons collection was extensive. "Don't let them scatter us." The townsfolk formed a rough line. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't professional, but it was something. The raiders hit them like a wave. Kagra moved on instinct. Block, parry, disarm, sweep the leg. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget, that she was built for this, that every muscle, every reflex, every hour of training had turned her into something functional. She didn't kill, didn't aim for throats or hearts or anything vital, but she broke noses, dislocated shoulders, sent raiders crashing to the ground with enough force that they stayed down and reconsidered their life choices. Beside her, Wulfric fought with the efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times. No wasted movement, no dramatic flourishes. Just practical violence that solved problems quickly. A raider swung at Kagra. She caught the blade with her sword, twisted, and sent his weapon flying. Then she kicked him hard in the chest. He went down, stayed down. "You're pretty good at the not-killing thing," Wulfric shouted over the chaos. "I've had practice." Apparently, the fight lasted maybe 10 minutes. That's all it took for the raiders to realize this town wasn't the easy target they'd expected. Between Kagra's orc-trained combat skills, Wulfric's experience, and the townsfolk's desperate determination not to die, the raiders found themselves on the losing end of what should have been an easy raid. They retreated, fast, bloody, minus 3 of their friends, who'd made the mistake of trying to fight Kagra directly, and had learned exactly how strong orcs were, even when they weren't trying to kill you. The town square fell silent, except for heavy breathing and the sound of someone throwing up from adrenaline. Kagra stood there, sword still in hand, trying to process what had just happened. She'd fought, really fought. And she'd won, and nobody had died. Well, none of the townsfolk. A few of the raiders might have died from their friends carrying them badly, but she hadn't killed anyone directly. That counted. Wulfric limped over. He had a cut on his leg, but was otherwise intact. "Still alive?" he asked. "Surprisingly." "Good work. You too." Greta walked up, looked at the retreating raiders, looked at her town that was still standing, looked at Kagra. "How do you feel about permanent work?" Greta asked. "What?" "We need security, real security. Not just farmers with pitchforks. You can fight without killing. That's valuable, rare, useful." Greta crossed her arms. "I'll pay. Not much, but enough. Plus room and board in the tavern." Kagra looked at Wulfric. He shrugged. "It's more than we had this morning." "And me?" Kagra asked. "I'm still an orc. People will get used to it," Greta interrupted. "You just saved their homes, their families, their lives. Fear is temporary. Gratitude lasts longer. Not forever, but longer." Kagra looked around the square, at the townsfolk who were staring at her. Not with fear this time. With something closer to respect. Confusion, sure, but respect too. "I'll need to think about it," Kagra said. "Think fast. Raiders might come back." "Give us until morning." Greta nodded, walked away, left Kagra and Wulfric standing in a town square littered with broken weapons and shattered confidence. "You want to stay?" Wulfric asked. "I don't know." "Do you?" "I'm asking you." That's not how partnership works. We decide together. Wulfric smiled. Look at you, already understanding teamwork. Kagra punched his arm, gently. I'm serious? So am I. He looked at the town, at the people slowly returning to their homes, at Greta's tavern still standing. We could keep moving, keep running, see what else is out there. Or we could stop. Just for a bit. See if this place works. See if people actually can get used to an orc living here. He met her eyes. Your choice. I'll follow either direction. Kagra thought about it, really thought. She'd spent her whole life in an orc clan that never wanted her, running from a place that had hung her from a tree, and now a human town was offering her work, safety, a chance. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't her original plan, because she'd never had a plan beyond survival, but maybe that was okay. 1 month trial, she said. What? We stay for 1 month. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we leave. No hard feelings, just move on. Wulfric considered this, then nodded. Deal. They shook on it. Human and orc. Partners. Behind them, Greta watched from her tavern window and smiled. She'd been counting their scars. Both of them had enough to be reliable. This might actually work. The first week was uncomfortable. That was the word Kagra kept using. Uncomfortable. Not hostile, not violent, just uncomfortable in the way things are when they don't fit quite right. People stared. Of course they stared. She was an orc living in a human town. That didn't happen. That couldn't happen, except it was happening, which meant people's brains had to work overtime to process the impossible but real situation. Some people crossed the street when they saw her. Some people nodded politely and hurried past. One old woman stopped her in the market and asked if she was going to eat anyone. Kagra had said no. The woman had seemed disappointed, like she'd been hoping for more dramatic gossip. Wulfric helped. His presence made things easier. He'd introduce her as his partner. He'd vouch for her. He'd casually mention how she'd saved the town during the raid. People listened to him because he was human, and that meant his opinions about orcs were somehow more valid than the orc standing right there. Kagra found that irritating, but practical. They'll warm up to you, Wulfric said on the 5th day. They were sitting outside Greta's tavern eating lunch. Real lunch, made by Greta's cook who actually knew what seasoning was. They're tolerating me, Kagra corrected. That's not the same as warming up. Tolerance is the first step. Acceptance comes later. And how long does later take? Depends on how many more raids you stop. As if summoned by irony, Lambert appeared. The monk had walked into town that morning. Tall, thin, carried himself with the kind of calm that suggested he'd either found enlightenment or had given up trying. He wore simple robes, brown, worn, covered in travel dust, and carried a walking staff that looked like it had seen more miles than most people saw in a lifetime. "Excuse me," Lambert said, stopping in front of their table. "I'm looking for lodging." "Tavern's inside," Wulfric said, pointing. Lambert looked at Kagra. Really looked. Not with fear, with curiosity. "You're orc." "Yes. Living in a human town. Currently. That's remarkable. How did you accomplish this?" "Saved them from raiders." Violence as introduction. Not my preferred method, but effective." Lambert smiled. It was a peaceful smile, the kind that made you think he'd never harmed anyone in his life. "I'm Lambert. I travel. I observe. I plant trees." "You plant trees," Kagra repeated. "Everywhere I witness violence, I plant a tree, as a reminder that life continues even after destruction." He pulled a seed from his pocket, held it up like it was the most important thing in the world. "I'll plant one here, for the raid." The raid was 5 days ago. Trees don't know time, only growth. Wulfric and Kagra exchanged a look. The kind of look that said, "This man is either very wise or very strange, and we can't tell which." "Greta will rent you a room," Wulfric said. "Mention we sent you. She likes monks, usually." "Thank you." Lambert bowed slightly, then looked at Kagra again. "You have kind eyes. That's unusual for warriors." "I'm not a warrior." "You carry yourself like one. But you're right. You're something else. Something better." He walked toward the tavern entrance, then paused. "The world needs more people who can fight, but choose not to kill. We have enough killers already." He went inside. Kagra stared at the door he'd disappeared through. Was that a compliment? I think so. Hard to tell with monks. He's going to plant a tree, apparently. That's his whole thing. Just implanting trees. Everyone needs a hobby. Kagra laughed. Actually laughed. Not the bitter laugh she'd perfected while hanging from a tree. A real one. This town is insane. Probably, but it's our kind of insane. That night, Lambert planted a seed in the town square, right where the raid had happened, a small ceremony attended by exactly 3 people, Greta, Wulfric, and Kagra. He said some words about growth and healing, about how violence leaves scars, but life finds ways to grow through them. Kagra touched the broken chain in her pocket, the one she carried everywhere now. Lambert's words made sense in a way that felt important. The second week was better, not easy, but better. A few people started nodding at Kagra without Wulfric having to introduce her first. The baker gave her a free roll one morning. Not out of charity, she made sure to clarify that, but because you're keeping the town safe, and that's worth a roll. Small gestures, small acceptances, small steps towards something that might eventually resemble normal. Wulfric worked with her on patrols. They'd walk the town perimeter twice a day, checking for threats, talking to people, being visible. It was boring work, which meant it was perfect. "You're good at this," Wulfric said during an evening patrol. "At walking around. At making people feel safe without being threatening. That's harder than it looks." Kagra thought about that. She was tall, green, muscular. Everything about her physical presence should make humans nervous. But she'd learned to move carefully, to smile when appropriate, to keep her voice soft, to be constantly aware of how much space she took up and how to make that space feel less threatening. It was exhausting, but it worked. "I hate that I have to do this," she admitted. "Do what?" "Make myself smaller, less orc, more acceptable." She gestured at herself. "I'm trying to fit into a shape that wasn't made for me." "I know. It's not fair." "No. It's not." They walked in silence for a while, past houses where families were settling in for the evening, past shops closing up, past the square where Lambert's seed was probably doing whatever seeds do underground. "But you're still here," Wulfric said eventually. "Still trying. That counts for something." "Does it?" "Yes, because the alternative is running, and we're both tired of running." Kagra couldn't argue with that. The third week, something changed. A child approached her, maybe 7 years old. Boy, farmer's kid based on the dirt under his fingernails and the hay stuck to his shirt. "Are you really an orc?" he asked. Kagra knelt down, put herself at his eye level. "Yes. My dad says orcs are monsters." "Some are." "Are you?" "I'm trying not to be." The kid thought about this, reached out, touched her arm, felt the green skin. The texture that wasn't quite like human skin, but wasn't that different either. "You feel real," he said. "I am real." "Can you lift heavy things?" "Yes." "Can you lift a wagon?" "Probably not a full one. Maybe an empty one." "That's so cool." He ran off, went back to playing whatever game kids played when they weren't interrogating orcs about their physical capabilities. Kagra stood up, found Wulfric watching from across the street with a small smile. "Progress," he said. "One kid not running away isn't progress. It's one more kid than yesterday." By the 4th week, Kagra had stopped counting how many people stared at her. Not because they'd stopped staring, they hadn't, but because she'd stopped caring as much. Staring was just what happened. It didn't mean violence. It just meant curiosity mixed with fear, mixed with the slow process of adjustment. She and Wulfric had settled into a routine. Morning patrol, training in the afternoon. Evening patrol, Greta's terrible jokes during dinner, Lambert's periodic philosophical observations about trees and existence. It was almost normal. Then Braca arrived. Kagra saw him before he saw her. Hard to miss an orc who stood 6.5 feet tall and walked like he owned every piece of ground his feet touched. Braca, war leader, the one who'd hung her from the tree. He wasn't alone. 6 other orcs with him. Warriors, real ones, the kind who'd passed their trials and earned the right to carry clan weapons. They walked into Millbrook at noon, which was the worst possible time if you wanted to not be noticed. The market was busy, people everywhere, and suddenly there were 7 orcs in the town square. People scattered, parents grabbed children. Shop owners retreated behind counters. Someone rang the warning bell that usually meant raiders. Wulfric was beside Kagra instantly. "Friends of yours?" "No. They look friendly." "They're not." Braka's eyes scanned the square. Found her. Locked on. "Kagra!" His voice carried. Everyone heard. Everyone turned. Kagra stepped forward. Heart pounding, hand not quite steady. But she stepped forward anyway. "Braka," she said. He walked toward her. The other orcs followed, stopped about 10 feet away, close enough to be threatening without being immediately violent. "Still alive," Braka said. Braka did not expect this. There it was. The thing Lambert had warned her about, talking in third person when angry, which meant Braka was very, very angry. "I'm alive," Kagra confirmed. "How?" She gestured at Wulfric. "I got help." Braka looked at Wulfric, dismissed him immediately, not worth his attention, just a human. "You dishonored clan. You ran." "I didn't run. You hung me from a tree." "Test of courage, to see if you find strength to survive, to see if you find way back." He stepped closer. "You did not come back, because there was nothing to come back to. Lies!" The shout made several townsfolk jump. "Clan is everything. Clan is honor. Clan is purpose. You abandoned this. You chose humans over blood. I chose living over dying. There's a difference." Braka's jaw tightened. His hand moved to the axe at his belt. "Braka gives you choice. Come back now. Face punishment. Redeem honor, or Braka takes your head. Here, now, shows humans what happens to orcs who forget who they are." The town square went very quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone knows violence is about 3 seconds away and nobody knows which direction it will go. Wulfric's hand moved to his sword. Greta appeared from her tavern with a crossbow. Lambert stood at the edge of the square, one hand in his pocket where he kept his seeds. Kagra looked at Braka, at the orc who'd raised her, trained her, tried to make her into something she couldn't be. "No," she said. "What?" "No, I'm not going back. I'm not facing your punishment. I'm not redeeming honor that I never lost." She pulled the broken chain from her pocket, held it up. "This is your honor, your shame, your system that breaks people who don't fit your expectations. I don't want it anymore." Braka stared at the chain, at the broken link, at the symbol of clan justice literally shattered in her hand. "You break sacred chain," he said slowly. "No, someone broke it for me. Showed me that chains only have power if you let them." "Who?" Kagra gestured at Wulfric. "The human you dismissed as not worth your attention." Braka looked at Wulfric again, really looked this time, saw the scars, the stance, the way he stood like he'd fight an entire orc war party if necessary, and probably wouldn't win but would make it expensive. "Human broke sacred chain," Braka said. "This is unprecedented." "A lot of things are unprecedented lately." Braka was quiet, thinking. His warriors shifted behind him, waiting for orders, waiting to see if this conversation ended in blood. "Braka will not take you back," he said finally. "If you will not return, then you are exile, permanent. Kagra is no longer of the clan, no longer orc, just nothing." "Good," Kagra said. "Being nothing with these people is better than being something with you." She expected rage. Expected violence, expected Braka to draw his axe and end this the way orcs ended most disagreements. Instead, he nodded slowly. "You have changed. Become soft. Become weak." He paused. "Or maybe strong in different way. Braka cannot tell. Take your time figuring it out. Braka will not return here. This is your territory now. But if you enter clan lands..." He left the threat unspoken. Didn't need to speak it. "I won't." "Good." Braka turned to leave. His warriors followed. They walked out of Millbrook the same way they'd walked in, like they owned the ground. But now they were leaving. And Kagra was staying. The town square stayed quiet for a full minute after they disappeared. Then someone started clapping, just one person, then another, then more, not everyone. Some people still looked terrified, some looked confused, but enough people were clapping that it counted as support. Greta lowered her crossbow. "That went well." "That was a disaster," Kagra said. "You're alive, they're gone, town's still standing. That's 3 wins. Take them." Wulfric walked over. "You okay?" "No, yes, I don't know." Kagra looked at the broken chain still in her hand. I just told my war leader to fuck off, in front of witnesses. There's no going back now. Good. Going back was never the plan. What is the plan? Stay here. Keep working. Keep living. Keep proving that orcs and humans can exist in the same space without killing each other. He put a hand on her shoulder. Revolutionary stuff. Lambert approached, pulled out another seed. I should plant another tree, for the violence that didn't happen. There wasn't any violence, Kagra pointed out. Exactly. That's worth celebrating. He walked toward the square to find a good spot. Kagra watched him go, then looked at Wulfric, then at Greta, then at the townsfolk who were slowly returning to their normal activities like 7 orcs hadn't just walked through their town and threatened one of their guards. This is insane, she said. You keep saying that, Wulfric replied, because it keeps being true. Then let's be insane together. He held out his hand. Kagra took it, human hand, orc hand, partners. In the town square, Lambert planted his seed right next to the first one. 2 trees that would eventually grow. 2 reminders that things could change. That violence didn't have to be the answer. That sometimes the bravest thing was just choosing to stay when everyone expected you to run. Kagra touched the broken chain one more time, then put it back in her pocket. She'd keep carrying it, not as a reminder of shame, but as a reminder of choice, of freedom, the kind you had to fight for, the kind you had to choose every single day, the kind that came with a cost, but was worth paying anyway. That night, Greta offered them permanent positions, not trial, not temporary, permanent. Kagra said yes before Wulfric could even open his mouth. 6 months passed, then a year, then 2. Millbrook changed slowly, the kind of change that happens like Lambert's trees, invisible day to day, but obvious when you looked back at where you'd started. More orcs came, not many, just a few, exiles, outcasts. People who'd heard about the town where an orc lived openly and humans didn't immediately try to kill her. They came looking for the same thing Kagra had found, a place to stop running. Wulfric trained them, taught them how to fight without killing, how to stand guard, how to be useful in a human town when your entire body was built for violence. Not all of them stayed. Some couldn't handle the constant stares, the whispers, the slow, grinding process of changing minds one conversation at a time. They left, went somewhere else, kept looking. But some stayed, built lives, found work, proved that coexistence wasn't just possible. It was practical. Kagra became something she'd never expected to be, a leader. Not of a clan, not of warriors, but of exiles, of people who didn't fit anywhere else and had found a place here. She taught them what she'd learned, about making yourself smaller so others could feel bigger, about patience, about the difference between weakness and choosing not to use strength, about carrying broken chains as reminders of what you'd left behind and what you'd chosen instead. Wulfric was there through all of it. Partner, friend, the person who'd cut her down when she was hanging between life and death and offered her a choice that changed everything. They never talked about what they were to each other. Didn't need to. Some relationships don't fit into easy labels. They were partners. That was enough. Lambert's trees grew. 2 of them now, small, barely saplings, but alive, growing, reaching toward a sky that didn't care what species had planted them. Greta's tavern became the unofficial meeting place for anyone who didn't quite fit the normal definition of normal. Humans who'd been exiled from other places. Orcs who'd failed trials. Monks who planted trees, bakers with sharp opinions, people who'd been broken by life and were figuring out how to build something new from the pieces. The scarred tankard, where scars meant reliability, where broken things found purpose. It wasn't perfect. Raiders still came sometimes, people still stared. Some townsfolk never really accepted the orcs, just tolerated them because the alternative was arguing with Greta, and nobody wanted that. But it worked. Mostly. Sometimes. Enough. 2 years after Kagra had been cut down from that tree, she stood in the same town square where Braca had confronted her. Lambert's trees had grown tall enough now that you could sit in their shade. Small shade, but real. Wulfric joined her. They didn't speak, just stood there. Two people who'd been hanging from different kinds of trees and had cut each other down. You ever miss it? Wulfric asked eventually. The clan, the old life. Kagra thought about it, really thought. Sometimes, not the clan itself, but the simplicity, knowing exactly who you were and what you were supposed to do. No questions, no doubts, just purpose. And now? Now everything's complicated and hard, and I have to choose who I am every single day instead of having it chosen for me. She pulled out the broken chain, looked at it. The metal had worn smooth from 2 years of carrying it in her pocket. But the choices are mine, that matters. Yeah, Wulfric said quietly. It does. A child ran past, human, chasing an orc child about the same age. They were laughing, playing, didn't care about species or history or all the reasons they weren't supposed to be friends. We're planting seeds, Kagra said. What? Like Lambert, we're planting seeds. We won't see the forest they become. But someone will. Wulfric smiled. When did you become philosophical? I've been hanging out with a monk who talks to trees. It was inevitable. They stood there a while longer, watching the town exist, watching the trees grow, watching people who shouldn't work together figure out how to make it work anyway. It wasn't the life Kagra had planned. She'd never planned to be hanging from a tree, never planned to be saved by a human, never planned to become security for a town that wasn't hers. But that was the thing about plans. They changed, broke, reformed into something different, something better. The broken chain stayed in her pocket, a reminder, not of shame, but of the moment she'd been given a choice and had decided living with uncertainty was better than dying with certainty. Freedom wasn't the absence of weight, it was choosing what weight to carry. And she'd chosen this, chosen Millbrook, chosen partnership, chosen a life that didn't fit any definition she'd been taught, but fit her better than anything else ever had. Behind them, Greta called out that dinner was ready. Lambert had convinced her to add some kind of experimental tree-based dish to the menu. It would probably be terrible, but they'd eat it anyway. That was what you did. When you found a place that accepted your broken pieces, you stayed. You helped. You planted seeds. You chose freedom every single day. Even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Kagra looked at the broken chain one last time, then put it away. She knew what it meant now, knew what it represented, not the past, but the bridge between who she'd been and who she was becoming. Some chains break us, some chains define us, and some chains, when broken, set us free. If this story moved you, if Kagra and Wulfric's journey reminded you that freedom is a choice we make every single day, then this channel needs you. Orc-Bound Tales is built on stories like this, stories where orcs aren't just monsters, where humans aren't just heroes, where broken people find each other and build something better than what they left behind. Hit that subscribe button, because every week we're planting seeds, stories that grow, stories that challenge what you think you know about monsters and men. And here's my question for you. What would you do if you found someone hanging from a tree? Would you walk away? Would you cut them down? Would you offer them a deal that changes everything? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. And your stories matter just as much as the ones we tell here. This is Orc-Bound Tales, where every choice matters, where every chain can be broken, where every exile finds home. See you in the next story.